You're tuned in to More Living with Jim Brogan, broadcast live from the Brogan Financial Studios at News Talk 98.7, where old-fashioned values, expert knowledge, and genuine understanding come together to give you the retirement straight talk you deserve. Jim's a former National Advisor of the Year recipient and a financial educator, and he's here today to talk about how you can live out the best years of your life. Jim and the Brogan Financial team have been helping retirees and pre-retirees across the Southeast for over 20 years in their pursuit of financial independence. You can reach them during the week at 865-862-6800. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn, because More Living with Jim Brogan starts now.
Hello, East Tennessee, and welcome to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. This is News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Do you ever have yard envy? I know sometimes I do. I really like our yard. I like the way it's landscaped. I like the way we tend it. But then sometimes I drive by a yard and I do have yard envy. Lush lawns, blooming flowers, landscape trimmed to perfection. Not everybody has a green thumb, and it takes time and sweat equity to maintain our yard. Today, our guest is Abby Stanley Jarrett's from Stanley's Greenhouse right here in Knoxville. She's followed in the footsteps of her parents and her grandparents. Abby is the third generation to work the family business at Stanley's Greenhouse. She has her degree in landscape design from the University of Tennessee. She definitely has a green thumb, and she's going to share some great tips and tricks for landscaping and gardening, keeping things tip-top, and even feeding your family from your backyard. Good morning, Abby. Welcome to More Living. It's great to have you with us.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us. It sounds like, Abby, you grew up around plants and the gardening business, your parents and your grandparents. Did you always know you wanted to follow in their footsteps?
Well, more or less. I knew that I loved it, and really it's been like home for me for my entire life. So it was kind of hard to think of anything else to do. And yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. Now y'all have your greenhouse, and you have all your plants and stuff like that, but you actually grow, don't you grow, you sell a lot of your own plant farm, right?
Right.
Talk to us about that.
Exactly. So that's what makes us so different. So actually, we've been a working farm for hundreds of years. It was a Davenport farm before Tennessee was the state. We were one of the top wheat producers in the state. And it was just my grandfather that kind of transferred to growing flowers away from actual vegetables and produce and such. And so that's where we kind of adopt our timeline, but we've been an active farm for a long time. And anyway, so now we grow over 70% of what we sell, which means that all of our plants are tax-free. I feel like a lot of people don't know that, which is we try to get that word out there because it's like 10% off every time you come in.
So when I buy plants from you, because you grow your own plants, I don't have to pay state income tax.
Huh?
I mean state sales tax.
Exactly, because Tennessee does that for farmers. That's awesome. Why when you go to the farmers market, you don't pay tax. So it's a great incentive, but not only that, but it also allows us to have better quality and better control of our product. So my husband is actually the grower, then Gerald, and he works tirelessly to make sure, and our whole group team, to make sure that we have like the best products possible, and they're not shipping across, this the country either most of the time. So
now, what about trees? Do y'all grow a lot of your own? Do you grow a lot of your own trees too?
Trees are probably the least amount of all the departments. However, we are we are producing more and more every year. And we've acquired some property and have a good handle on being able to do more here soon. But we do bring in a decent amount of our trees. We also grow quite a bit as well, the smaller sizes. So.
Now, when it comes to landscaping and landscape design, Abby, where do we start? How can I have a landscape design that looks professional without professional help?
Yeah. Well, we just missed a seminar. We had a seminar in March with Gary Mendez on landscape design. So we've got seminars every Saturday to try to help home gardeners in different areas of gardening. And they're all free and open to the public. You can see them on our website. But as another resource, really, the internet is powerful in both ways. You can look at a lot of great resources on there for design. There are a lot of books out there. But the main thing that I tell people when they come in as far as where to start is you want to start with your larger plant material, your trees and your shrubs, and then go from there. It's really best to plant those things in the fall to get them established, and then fill in with your perennial plants that will come in every year, and then also fill in the front with your blooming annuals. So to have all of everything looking cohesive, you really need all pieces of the puzzle.
And typically we want things to, we want to time, things that bloom at different times throughout the year, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so doing that's helpful, having all of the variety of different types of plants. But yeah, doing research on native, what plants do good for our zone. Our employees are great help. So, if you have pictures of your yard, we can always provide suggestions. We don't design consult, but we can always show options and help out. So, yeah.
If I want to have a great looking yard, is that something that is that something an average person can take up, or do you really have to have a green thumb, or else you're going to need professional help?
No, not at all. I don't believe in green thumbs. I hate that terminology. You're not born with whatever ability you lead. Most people, it's knowledge. It's just doing it. It's trial and error, and figuring out what works for space and figuring out how to grow things. Soil is a big deal. We are plagued with clay here, so we recommend using soil conditioner to amend. And you've got good soil, most things are going to grow well. And as long as you know you're putting a plant where, the conditions are suitable for it, then it should be fine. And our professionals can help with that. So it's not rocket science. It doesn't have to be, you just have to put things where they need to be put, follow directions, and we're always there to help advise along the way.
We're visiting with Abby Stanley Jared. She is with Stanley's Greenhouse, and there are 3 generations out there. We're talking about gardening and landscaping. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about East Tennessee and some of the challenges, but also some of the great things we have here in East Tennessee to be able to have a great lawn and a great garden. So stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
This is More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm Jim Brogan. We're with you every Every Saturday, 9 to 10 a.m., and again from 3 to 4 p.m. You can also catch us online. Go to broganfinancial.com and click on radio. We're visiting this morning with Abby Stanley Jareds, and she's with Stanley's Greenhouse. We're talking about landscaping, gardening, all those great things. I do want to ask Abby some questions about East Tennessee specifically, but before we do, one other thing about landscaping. Like if I have plants picked out, and I know what I like, but I don't know how to design the layout to make the best visual impact, what is your advice? Do we have Abby on the line? Hello, Abby, are you there? I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay.
Did you hear my question?
Okay. Yeah. So it really depends how much you want to spend. You can obviously hire a designer if you want something of that magnitude. Otherwise, you can maybe just look online at some ideas for how to design things out. And again, smaller scale, our professionals at Stanley's could also help just advise as far as like, obviously you would want to put like taller plants in the background, you know, and that sort of thing, and spacing and whatnot. It's kind of how far do you want to dive into it, but
yeah, no, that's good advice. So in Tennessee, we have the benefit of great weather. We got lots of rain. Things seem to stay green for the most part, even without trying. What are some easy plants that someone can get that will survive, even if you tend to neglect them?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends kind of what we're talking about, but obviously natives are great. We really like to push natives. It's really important to our ecosystem here. So as far as trees go, there are a lot of great trees out there that people can plant. One uncommon one that I love is serviceberry, that a lot of people know the dogwoods, but they don't know those. And red buds and that sort of thing. As far as shrubs go, there are a lot of really easy, low-maintenance types. There are junipers, there are azaleas that are blooming right now. Viburnum is a wonderful one that's blooming right now. So many different varieties, sizes, super fragrant. I could go on and on. Yeah.
Let me ask you about, you mentioned azaleas, and that's interesting because I love, the azaleas are so beautiful when they're in bloom. The rest of the year, I don't think they're very attractive bushes at all. Right. And I know there's some knockoff options. How popular are knockoff, whether it's azaleas, roses? Seems like those are becoming more and more popular. Are you seeing a lot more of the knockoff type stuff that can offer other advantages?
Yeah, so I guess when you mean knockoff, maybe you mean just kind of like, I don't know, like the generic form. We carry all forms, but we try to not just be like, you know, what you'd find at Lowe's. So we have a lot of like variety and a lot of more interesting plants as opposed to just like your generic types. Those are really popular. Like, for instance, like the knockout roses were like such a fad for a long time, but I think people are kind of getting away from that now and starting to explore more natives that I mentioned, that actually have a purpose in the landscape as opposed to just being pretty. And then also, more interesting and more different and unique, options. Because we live in such a great climate here that we have so many options.
We do. You know, you mentioned trees. Bradford pears are all over Tennessee and the South. They are an invasive species. They're so invasive that North Carolina is trying to eradicate them. Why is the Bradford pear so bad?
Right. Oh, gosh. Well, Bradfords are bred off of the Asian pear, the calorie pear. They were bred to not have the thorns that they do, but they have extremely low crotch angles, which makes them really susceptible to breaking and falling, for one. They are invasive, as you mentioned, so they spread throughout the landscape and choke out any native species. And they also, their second offspring, when they reproduce, becomes that calorie pear, which has these insanely long thorns. And they are extremely detrimental to farmers and people in the country. They eat up the tractors and tires, and they're awful trees in all ways.
So what is
for the allergies?
So what is a native plant and tree that I could look at instead of a Bradford pear?
Yeah, well, I mentioned the serviceberry, and that one blooms white, so that would be a direct correlation. It also has gorgeous red fall color and beautiful berries in the summer, so 3-season interest there. And then another native that I love are red buds. And then there are dogwoods. Let's see, blooming natives. Yeah, then there are other options that are not natives, of course, cherry trees and crab apples and other blooming spring trees that are gorgeous.
What are the best small trees to plant beside a home?
Well, all of those that I mentioned.
Yeah.
Japanese maples are really popular.
I love Japanese maples.
Mm-hmm. They're really
river
popular.
Birch good?
River birch are good. They are going to be very thirsty, so that's just something to note. As long as you have enough water for them, it would be fine, and obviously the size, capacity. But, yeah, it really depends what you're thinking. Crepe myrtles are another good option for something easy and pretty.
I love crepe myrtles.
Yeah.
Speaking of crepe myrtles, let's talk about pruning, because it's so interesting how different people do their crepe myrtles. And I've had different landscape experts on the show actually in the past that have different thoughts. But I see some people that just prune more of the ends of the branches, where they get kind of scraggly, and then but then so many people chop them way down. But then when you see everything bloom, it doesn't seem to make a huge difference one way or the other. What do you recommend in pruning crepe myrtles?
Well, I recommend not to. I recommend to choose the size of the tree that you want it to be and leave it alone and let it be.
So no pruning at all, not even the ends of the limbs?
I mean, it's really just for size at that point. So no, I don't. There's no reason to prune them for the health of the tree, and it really ends up making them look horrible and making them sucker at the bottom, and it just, we call it crepe murder. When you see them just totally chopped.
I've heard someone else say that too.
Shopping malls. I mean, it looks awful. No, just choose the right size of the tree that you want it to be. And
so we've got, like I'm looking out, we have a crepe myrtle on either side of our driveway, and I love them when they're in bloom especially. But why do some people chop them down like that? I mean, I'm not real up on all that stuff, but it just seems like, what's the point?
Well, I don't know. I think it keeps landscaping companies in business, maybe. Obviously, the shopping centers may have whatever, I don't know, reasoning. I think people want to keep things small. Everyone wants to keep things small, but there are a lot of dwarf varieties, so it's unnecessary as long as you choose the right variety.
When it comes to trees, is it better to start with a seedling or a fairly mature tree?
It's better to start small for the health of the tree. And like I said, it's best to plant in the fall. You can get things established right now, but we really recommend planting in the fall. That way it has a long enough time for the root system to get established before the heat and stress of summer.
We're visiting with Abby Stanley Jared. She's with Stanley's Greenhouse. We're talking about landscaping and gardening. When we talk about trees and shrubs. Talk to us a little bit about pruning, the basics of pruning shrubs particularly.
Well, that's kind of a pigeonhole. Basics. Well, it really depends on what you're going for. Again, I don't think that pruning is very necessary. It's usually just a size thing. I prefer to let things go. If there are any dead or overlapping branches, then obviously you want to prune those. There's a thought out there, you never want to take off more than a third of the plant at one time for its health. So that's what I usually tell people. Beyond that, it's mostly aesthetic, and not always necessary.
So pruning, by and large, is not necessarily, because that's news to me. So maybe we talked about the crepe myrtles, of course, but pruning as a rule doesn't necessarily improve the overall health of the shrub or whatever you're pruning.
Not necessarily, no. I mean, if there are like dead bloom spikes, then obviously you want to prune those. And taking off like any, dead blooms will increase the plant to produce more. And if you want something to grow more laterally, then you cut the top to increase that lateral growth. But it's really manipulation, and it's not usually for the health. It can be, but those are specific situations.
Yeah, I guess we do like our shrubs and stuff to be certain shapes. I guess would be the main reason people do that, it sounds like.
People we just want to manipulate things.
Sure. Let's talk about grass. Seems like the best grass here in this area is Kentucky fescue. What do you like in this area? Are you a big fescue fan? I love Kentucky fescue.
Well, we don't do grass. We like to promote non-lawns. Lawns and grass, they really kill the biodiversity. So when you think about, you don't have like this manicured lawn, it's got clover and it's got violets. And I know that bothers a lot of people, but it's really important for the biodiversity of our native ecosystem. For the fritillary butterflies, for instance, their host plants are those little Corsican violets in the lawn. And clover is important for early pollinators, pollination. So we don't sell grass, and we usually try to steer people more towards having more of an actual living garden space that provides more than just looking nice to them. It can look nice to you, and it can also be more beneficial.
That's just interesting because I just love the look of a nice lawn of fescue.
Right. and that goes way back. There's actually some psychology behind that. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not as beneficial for the environment.
We're visiting with Abby Stanley Jarrett. When we come back, I want to get into gardening. How do we start a garden? What do we do if we want to plant a garden where there's currently grass? We'll kind of get into some different gardening tips. I'll have my dollars and cents segment. What can we learn from the history of income taxes? We're starting to hear more and more talk about the tax increase that's coming at the end of next year. More and more talk out of Washington. What can we learn from history? Stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
This is More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. This morning we're talking about beautiful landscaping, and we're going to get into gardening with our guest, Abby Stanley Jared. She is with Stanley's Greenhouse. Before we do get back to Abby, however, it is time for Dollars and Cents.
Want to be sure you are getting the most out of your retirement? For all the years of your retirement? That's the primary goal of More Living with Jim Brogan and our Dollars and Cents segment, where we provide you with an important financial tip that will help positively impact the quality of your life in retirement. And now, here's Jim with this week's Dollars and Cents tip.
There's more and more talk out of Washington starting to become prevalent about our coming income tax increase and what we should do. We're having a tax increase at the end of next year because many of the core components of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from the beginning of 2018 are expiring, and we're going back to the rates from 2017, adjusted for inflation. And I think it's worthwhile. What can we learn from the history of our income taxes? So if you go back through history, you know, the income tax system we have today was first instituted in 1914, and it was a marginal system. Marginal means whatever your tax bracket is, you don't pay, like if you're in a 22% tax bracket, you don't pay 22% income tax on all of your income. We all pay 10% income tax on the first, if you're joint filer, about $21,000 of income. The next 70 to 80,000 of income, we all pay 12%. So, for example, when we get up over 100,000 of taxable income, we're in a 22% marginal bracket, but we're not paying 22% on all of our income. And that's an important thing to understand when we do our tax planning, because if we do anything to trigger taxable income, things with investments or Roth IRA conversions, capital gains, whatever, we're going to be taxed in whatever our marginal tax bracket is, whether that's ordinary income or our marginal capital gains rate. The highest income tax in 1914 was 7%. And that was for people with income over $500,000 in 1914. I mean, let's be honest, the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers, that's about it. Now, you know, our highest income tax rate is 37%. But when I look at history, what was our highest income tax bracket in history? 1946, it was 94%. And we had an 18-year period in the late 40s through the 50s and into the early 60s where the highest income tax bracket was over 80%, all 18 years. And for most of those years, it was over 90%. If you worked in a state with a state income tax, there was a point at which you just didn't really make any money. Everything had to go to the government, either the state or federal government. Then the tax rates in the 70s were back down in the highest tax rate was 70%. 1980, the highest tax rate went to 50%. Now then in 1986, the highest income tax rate was slashed to 28%. And we ushered in what is a low era of taxation from a federal income tax perspective. Now it doesn't feel like low taxation because everywhere we turn around we're taxed. We have state income tax, state sales tax. Some states have income tax. We have capital gains tax. We have property tax. We have gasoline tax. We have all these taxes we pay. But when it comes to federal income tax, this last 35 years has been an era of low taxation when we look at the rest of our U.S. history. Yet we have a $34 trillion deficit. We have unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare. So we're getting more and more talk about what's going to happen with taxes. Just at the top of the hour, just now at 9 o'clock, we had the news saying that Republicans are pushing to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and the Democrats are resisting that. There's always going to be an argument. Now, we're kind of coming into the election, so things are very, very politically driven, of course. The bottom line is our taxes are going up at the end of next year, and the tax deduction, the standard deduction is going down. The average two-income household in East Tennessee, if you're, right around low six-figure income combined, you're looking at about a $3,000 increase in taxes just from the standard deduction going down. But then where are we going to be 10 years from now with our income taxes? So in my opinion, we're in the lowest tax environment for federal taxation that we're likely to be in for the rest of my life. I'm 54 years old. So what should you be doing to take advantage of lower income tax rates today? Maybe I should pay a lower tax rate today in order to not pay a higher tax rate tomorrow. And that's where we do things like we consider Roth conversions. We consider things like harvesting capital gains. A lot of people talk about tax loss harvesting, but tax gain harvesting is extremely powerful and valuable. So be sure you address your tax plan as a core component of financial planning. And be intentional about how you structure investments and when you're retired, retirement income, so that you can control what shows up on your tax return and what does not, and when you pay that income tax.
That's our Dollars and Cents segment for this week. You can find this week's Dollars and Cents segment and others by visiting BroganFinancial.com.
Pellissippi State is having their one-night class, Tax Planning in Your Retirement. It's coming up. I'm teaching it. It's on May the 7th. It's a week from Tuesday. So it's a Tuesday evening, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. It's just a one-night class. Pellissippi State, Hardin Valley. I'm going to cover the main things I think everybody needs to know about tax planning and your retirement. Whether you're retired or not, if you're within 7-8 years of retirement, or you're retired, this class would be for you. We'll focus entirely on tax planning, income taxes, investment taxation, Social Security taxation. We're going to look at all of those things. You can find out more. Go to PellissippiTaxPlanning.com, and you can download a syllabus. Again, PellissippiTaxPlanning.com. That one-night class, again, is Tuesday, May the 7th at 6:30 p.m. at Pellissippi State, Hardin Valley. Today we're visiting with Abby Stanley Jareds, and we're talking about landscaping, gardening. Let's get into gardening, Abby. First off, what should we do if we want to start a garden where there is currently grass?
There are a couple different options. You can put down cardboard or some sort of mat over top and basically just smother it and kill it, and then create your bed from that. There are a lot of tools that I've personally used that can kind of, if that works and if it comes up good enough that you can scoop underneath and create a bed that way. We don't promote the use of chemicals, but obviously that's another route. A couple different types of things that you can do.
And then talk about, you mentioned soil earlier in the show. Talk about in this red clay environment we have, what should we be mixing in to have a great garden? What should we be mixing into the soil?
Yeah, so we really push our soil conditioner. So we've got two different types. The premium is just composted pine bark, but it helps break up the clay and provide drainage. It's all I use in my garden, and it's fabulous. We also have a higher end that has some compost in it too. So both are good components. That conditioner helps break up the clay, and then compost is good organic material to help feed the soil. So both elements are really good. I hear a lot of people and a lot of unsurety over putting potting soil in the ground, and that's just mainly the biggest thing. You don't want to be putting potting soil in the ground. And also, mulch really isn't doing anything. Your standard, whatever color mulch isn't providing really anything as far as benefit to the soil, just aesthetics.
So does mulch not help keep moisture in, or like in periods of intense heat, does the mulch help somewhat keep the soil cooler?
Yeah, and that would be, I guess, the only real benefit. But it can be, the larger particle size can be really suffocating to plants, and they need that airflow. You want to create a natural environment for them, and so putting a turtleneck sweater on top, they kind of suffocate, and they don't like that. So we recommend mulching with our soil conditioner. It's a nice dark brown, and it's not only going to create a nice even color, but also it's going to have the benefits of not suffocating and decomposing and breaking down that clay.
Now, it seems like this would be a good time to plant a vegetable garden. I know my wife, she grew up in South Carolina, and they really, calling it a garden wouldn't do. It's really more of a small farm almost. She would love to just eat a tomato right off the vine, especially if it was still warm in the sun. What are good vegetables to grow in East Tennessee?
Yeah, definitely. Well, tomatoes are the biggest thing, right? Granger County, and we grow a ton of different varieties. We grow all kinds of heirloom varieties of tomatoes, but we're rolling into warm season, so you can also do like your cucumbers, zucchini, squash, okra, watermelon, strawberries. Nice.
Now, strawberries are pretty tough, right? I mean, I've always heard strawberries are hard to grow.
Not necessarily. No, they can. Not really. No.
Well, I guess that was a myth then, but I always learned because my grandfather, way back, he had a peach orchard down in Loudoun County, and then up at his house in Ozone, Tennessee, in Cumberland County, he would grow strawberries, and all I heard about my whole childhood was how hard it was from my mom to tend strawberries. So I guess that's
if you're doing so on a large scale, that's different. But for a home gardener, it's not anything crazy.
Now, gardens can be more than just fruits and vegetables or flowers. I have heard that mixing in flowers is good for pollination and even insect repellent. What plants are a good choice for repelling pesky bugs?
Right. So there are a lot of great herbs out there that are good for repelling. One of the top, though, that people usually plant around their veggie gardens is marigolds. Marigolds are kind of a little bit naturally insecticidal, pesticidal, to an extent, obviously. But, yeah, marigolds are one of the top things you want to plant around your veggie garden. And then there are a lot of great herbs that are deterrents, too. A lot of the lemon-scented herbs are great for deterring different insects, and lavender and, certain.
We're visiting with Abby Stanley Jarrett. She's with Stanley's Greenhouse. When we come back, we'll have a few last gardening tips, including how do we keep the critters from eating all our produce. Stay with us. This is More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back. This is More Living right here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm Jim Brogan. We're visiting with Abby Stanley Jarrett this morning and talking about gardening and landscaping. Let's talk about organic, Abby. Organic, even organics can use pesticides. So what is the difference between how organic and non-organic produce is treated?
Oh, goodness. That's another rabbit hole. Well, there are treatments that are certified organic, so that would be OMRI certified products that you can treat. That basically means that they've gone a big certification process, that they're not harmful to us or to the environment to the extent that they're used properly. There are a lot of different products out there. As far as produce goes, though, it's really sticky. A lot of people don't want to use anything at all. But
you
there are a lot of
to do
things
some. You almost have to do some
you
kinds
kind
of things, right?
You kind of do. You really do. Yeah.
Now, what about the critters, pests, rabbits? How do we keep them from eating our stuff before we get a chance to harvest it? What's the best way?
Yeah, well, really no one has a foolproof answer. I mean, nature is nature, and we have to coexist with it as best we can. I would never get any of my blueberries before the birds would get them, but I never tried. The biggest thing is that you could do is create a barrier, obviously. So having some sort of fencing around your vegetable garden that is tough, that things cannot get through, is one of the best ways to go about that. You can do sometimes bird netting over the top or any sort of netting over the top. Obviously, things can chew through things. So again, nothing's foolproof. There are a lot of other ways too that people have at-home remedies of putting chili powder around and coyote urine and different predator urine types. And then there are obviously store-bought repellents that sometimes work depending on how hungry the animal is.
Now, Jill, who you spoke with, of course, and she's our director of marketing, helps me produce the show. She says her aunt told her to sprinkle red pepper flakes on the vegetables. Does that work?
Right. I mean, again, does it work? It depends how hungry the animal is, but that's what I mentioned with the chili powder. That's a common thing. Yeah, any sort of hot substance that usually is irritating to most animals. But again, it always depends how hungry they are.
Now, if we don't have a lot of space, Abby, talk about how we can get started with a container garden. What are the type of items we would want to plant in a container garden?
Yeah, well, container gardening is big right now, and there are a lot of things that are coming out to be bred to be smaller and more compact for container use. I do all of my herbs in containers because it's just easier that way. Just come and grab a chunk of basil, and go. So a lot of herbs are just great for that. And then tomatoes are perfect for containers. There are varieties that stay smaller and like a better bush type, and you can also use some stakes. But they can be grown in containers. Vining plants are more difficult, but there are a lot of things that you can do. In containers.
Okay, well, Abby, unfortunately we're out of time. We just have about a few seconds here. Give us your website. How can people find Stanley's Greenhouse?
Yeah, our website is www.stanleysgreenhouse.com. We are also on Instagram and Facebook, Stanley's Greenhouse. We are physically located at 3029 Davenport Road, which is in South Knoxville, just about 5 minutes from downtown. Come and see us.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Abby. It's been great to have you with us today to talk about landscaping and gardening.
Thank you for having me.
That's Abby Stanley Jared. She's with Stanley Greenhouse, and we've been talking about landscaping and gardening. The greater environment provides for more living so you can live the best years of your life your way. Thank you to Jill for helping produce the show. Thank you to Wayne for helping engineer the show. Thanks for tuning in. Check out our upcoming class, PellissippiTaxPlanning.com on May the 7th. You've been listening to More Living with Jim Brogan on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
The views expressed by Jim Brogan and his guests are not that of Cumulus Media. Any discussion of financial, legal, and tax planning strategies is not intended to be individualized advice and is general in nature. Always consult with your advisor for advice specific to your needs. This program's content does not represent a recommendation of any particular security, strategy, or investment by Jim Brogan or Brogan Financial Incorporated.